Hi, and welcome to Hope Through Conversations, where we have open, respectful dialogue on a multitude of topics in an effort to educate, empathize, and create positive change. I'm your host, Rose Colarossi. In this edition of Hope Through Conversations, I sit down and have conversations with my Black girlfriends, Black men, and Black associates in order to give some insight into their world and their perspective. I have been so sad, so angry, and I have never felt so ignorant these past few weeks as to what my Black friends and family have been experiencing their whole lives. It is my intention that these conversations will allow us all to gain greater insight into other cultures and other people's perspectives and highlight the fact that we have many, many more similarities than we do differences.
It can be terrifying. I mean, really, when we first moved here, my son remained in California and was living to the best of his means because he refused to do things our way. But he was pretty much on his own, had a really great group of friends, but was on his own and had a car. It terrified me every day.
Now, what part of California was he in?
Northern California. He's just outside of San Francisco.
Okay.
He's since moved to Reno, Nevada, but he was pretty much by himself there. We were in Texas. His older sister was in San Francisco, living on her own in the Mission District, and had her group of friends. So we weren't as concerned about her. Mm-hmm. But him going out scared me all the time and still does. I mean, I wake up every once in a while just terrified. I'm like, okay, let me call him just to make sure nothing happened, to make sure he wasn't pulled over by the police. He wears dreads. He's the nicest person you'll want to meet, but he's 6'3". He's a Black man who is 6'3", who is the sweetest person in the world, but a cop doesn't see that. They don't know that. I mean, his experiences, even to this point, and in fact, he did have a bad experience in high school with, I guess, a police officer and a friend that led him astray because he did something stupid that he should not have done. But when they called, and even now, I mean, I kind of get mad because I should have been called sooner. I don't know if that was because the kids involved were Black or what the issue was, mm-hmm. But I was called later. But when I found out what he did, I was just outraged because I didn't raise my son to do things that were not.
We don't, but they do dumb things. Yeah.
But he did. And so, as we were walking over, I was walking with him and the on-site police officer. And the police officer, I think at one point he was like, oh, I might need to protect this child from his mother because she might kill him.
Oh, yeah. We all have the wooden spoon. We all have the look of death. Yeah.
Really. But he commented that he was like, oh, well, and I can't remember how he put it, but basically it was that, most of the Black women or parents that we deal with don't yell at their children. They're yelling at us for pulling them over. It's like, everyone else yells at me for doing that. I'm like, I'm not yelling at you. I mean, taking a step back now, I don't know if it was partly racist that he got caught. Don't know. And really that wasn't my issue. My issue mm-hmm. was with my son.
Right.
But I mean, he was on school. It was a safe situation. He has been pulled over for driving while Black, I'm pretty sure every Black male in this country has been.
So talk about why am I being pulled over? Is that question even asked? Do you even dare to ask that?
Well, his time and also my husband's time was like, something happened. A Black person did it, so we're pulling you over because it could have been you. Really? And until they figure out that it's not you, it's That's a scary moment. Now, I find out these things afterwards. I find out, and my son, to protect me, doesn't tell me until years later what actually happened. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, by the time he told me 2, 3 years later, okay, I can't be scared about that. But then it does give me pause to, well, I'm hoping you're not going to be pulled over again for anything ridiculous like just driving or having a tail light out. But yeah, it's happened to everyone. My husband, when he was, I guess, college age, was pulled over. He and his friends, they were coming back from college, headed home, got pulled over in the middle of their journey somewhere because there had been a robbery or something, and it was done by a number of Black people. It may not have been the same number that was in the car, but you know, they were young, they were Black, they were driving in a car. Okay, good enough, pull them over. And for them, it sounded as though it was scary. My husband tried not to make it too scary because that's what you do. You never try, you want to make the other person, you want them to know, but you don't want to scare them.
Which goes back to you being a 9-year-old girl and not telling your parents because you're protecting them, not telling your brother because you're protecting them. You don't want something to happen to them, because what would I do if that happened to my child? I'd run out and I'd be screaming and yelling, and yeah.
Right.
But I'm not thinking I'm going out there, I'm screaming and yelling, and because of the color of my skin, I'm going to get in trouble.
Exactly.
That's the difference here. I mean, that's what we're trying to get through here. That's the difference.
That's the difference.
One of my closest friends, the girl I was telling you about that we served together, and my family loves her. She's a part of my family. My husband loves her. Everybody loves her. And we're coming out of service one day, and I was like, oh, I got pulled over last night. I said, oh, I hate that feeling, even though you haven't done anything wrong. And she's like, yeah, imagine that's my greatest fear. And it was never like, well, imagine what I'm like, but she's like, that's my greatest fear. And I went, oh, yeah. And my husband, who's standing there, goes, why is that your greatest fear? This goes back to, like, if that's not what your heart is like, or that's not how you are, a lot of times you just don't think that way. Like, children grow up, and like you said, your son had this diverse group of friends and their family, and why would anybody ever treat me differently until it happens, right?
Right.
So he's like, I don't understand, Celeste. Like, why are you scared of getting pulled over?
Right.
And we had to sit and have a conversation, and my husband was like, dumb, what? And then started getting angry, like, who would ever harm you or do anything to you? And we're going through this conversation. I'm like, yeah, Rob, for the color of her skin, like, that could happen. But then on the flip side, you know, her and I were having conversations because we have a lot of girlfriends that have husbands that are police officers. And they're good, these are good men. And she, you know, so we're having this conversation, and she's like, listen, it doesn't matter if you're Black or white, yellow, green, purple. There are good and there are bad.
Yes.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
And that's another part of this conversation. It's unfortunate for the good police officers that are out there that are trying to do good, that don't treat people differently, that are being bundled into that as well. So it happens in so many. You know, let's bundle this person because they're Black. Let's bundle this person because they're white. Let's bundle this police officer because he's a police officer. And it's like, that's not how all people are. We're individuals. And it's also, and when you're listening to a lot of these conversations on social media, I mean, older Black men and women and older Black white women and white men are still learning that, even though that I mean, I'm learning so much, but we're not going to learn unless we have these conversations.
I have encountered people who, or at least one or two people who were on a police force and who are what I believe to be good people, but think that they can use the N-word in certain instances and think that they can use it the proper way. as though there's some proper way. So you can use that word to dehumanize people that are bad or they've been disenfranchised so that they're maybe committing a small petty crime, but you get to beat them up and call them the N-word because of what they did or where they grew up or what you're putting upon them, because really you're putting your thoughts of what they are on them.
That's exactly it.
And then some of them live down to it or exceed your expectation or whatever, but using the word and dehumanizing people in a way that you feel that you can segment people. So where you might be that same officer and not use that word with me because you know me, but you might use it with someone else of color because, oh, well, that person is different from you because they did this. And no, they're not. Mm-hmm. We're all Black. Mm-hmm. We all have different circumstances and histories behind us, but that word means the same to every single one of us. I don't care. Mm-hmm. If you call my brother that, then you've called me that. Mm-hmm. So you can't differentiate. You can't say, oh, well, this person is truly that word. There's no definition of that word that is defined as a bad person. That word was not used to indicate a bad person. It was used to indicate someone who is of a darker pigment than you. Mm-hmm. And so trying to use it as there's some correct way to use it, no, there is not.
We used to sit in my family, like when we would discuss and say, we don't, like none of us could understand. And then I remember one time I'm sitting there and I'm like, if you think about our friends and our family, what do we do every summer? What do we do not anymore because of skin cancer, but as a kid growing up, what do we do every summer? What does a white person do every single summer? I mean, when I was a kid, we'd go to the Jersey Shore from New York. That's the place, right? And you'd slather yourself with baby oil and iodine. and I think back, because we're around the same age, right? I think back, and we literally, and I think of the craziness, first of all.
That is not smart.
There was aluminum foil. I mean, like, and then someone would be timing, like, and I think back and I'm like, we were like rotisserie chickens. Like, okay, turn. Okay, now turn. Okay, now turn. So that we could have a tan and our skin would be darker. Okay, are you some of the same people that are treating someone different because of their skin color? Like, it makes no sense.
It made no sense.
No sense to me whatsoever. And so my mom and I were like, yeah, that's like, my mom's like, Ro, I never even thought it. She's like, it's crazy. It's crazy what people do or how they think or what they say or how they've been raised, and they think saying something is no big deal. Not the N-word, but different things. And like you said, like my girlfriend Stephanie and I were having this conversation, and she's like, you know, some of my friends and some of my neighbors have reached out to me, and she's like, and one of them said to me, well, Stephanie, you're different. Your family's different.
I've heard that.
She's like, and I said, well, what did she mean you're different? She goes, because I'm in a predominantly white neighborhood and we are affluent and I'm different. No, I'm not different. I'm black is black. White is white. Like, that's what we need to understand. Like, it is what it is, but we're all just one race. We just have different colors on our skin. And yes, the history is horrendous. It's horrendous. There's no doubt about it. But have these conversations and look in each other's eyes and think about to yourself when you're listening, how was I raised? Did I inherit the thoughts, the thinking, the traditions, whatever it is, the thinking of my parents, of my grandparents, because of their situations? you know? Or am I trying to evolve and show my children and show myself and show my grandchildren that, you know what? We should love one another until there's a reason not to, individually. Nothing to do with your background, nothing to do with the skin color, nothing to do with your ethnicity, nothing at all. I mean,
Right.
it just doesn't make sense to me because, you know, listen, I could be in a room and I could like you if you're black and I don't like you because you're white. Or I could like you because you're white. It's not about because you're white or because you're black. It's either I like you or I don't like you.
Right.
There
Right.
should be no difference, but there is, and this is why we're having this conversation. So, what about your children? I would think your son in particular, but it could be your daughter and even your husband and even you. So one of the conversations that I had with one of my guy friends who's black said, I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. And I can bring it back to the first time that someone did call me that word. And my chest tightened up and I didn't know I was having an anxiety attack. My chest, tightened up and I didn't know what was going on in my body. And I just knew how this made me feel. And I was afraid and I was this. And then I would have anxiety in certain situations. I'm the only black man here. He grew up in a predominantly white area. I'm the only black man. Before, it never bothered me. Now
Right.
I'm having this sensation of my chest feels like it's going to collapse and I'm feeling sick to my stomach and whatever. Speak to me about that. Anybody in your family deal with anxiety because of it? Do you think?
Not as, I think growing up spiritually and being Christian and being able to pray has made a huge difference to most of my family.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I will say that I see more anxiety in my husband and my brother, sometimes my son, but not as much. But I know that he has been in situations where he does have anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that even my sister-in-law has alluded to the fact that my brother being pulled over the first time, she had no clue because he was so panicked and
because she's white. She's white.
Yes, she's white. She's white. Yes. And when she saw that, that's when she got it. But just behaving in the world, I mean, I feel like it affects my husband probably more so than me. And
Mm-hmm.
he behaves in a manner that makes sure that he stays alive. You don't want to be that angry black man, even if you have a right to be,
Mm-hmm.
because that angry black man scares white people and gets you killed. So there's a certain way to be. And yes, and we've all had the conversation many times with our children. And my son, for him, that's where my anxiety lies the most, is when I think about my son and when I look at him, because he's even taller than my husband, and he does have long dreads. And so I'm like,
I've seen pictures of him. He's a great looking kid. And he looks like the nicest person in the world. He just oozes like that he's like the nice guy, It reminds me of my son Connor. Like he's the guy he may say what everybody else in the room is thinking. He's kind of the fun guy and he just looks very approachable, that's why it's like I say to myself, okay, so he's 6 foot something. So are half of the guys in my family. But it's the perception and how you were raised and that fear that was ingrained in you or was learned. But I find it interesting that your daughter-in-law, who is white, married a black man, married into a black family, didn't understand it until they were being pulled over.
Yeah, I mean, and she understood it to a point, but it was the physically seeing it, because she's always been there. They are very much involved in Black issues. They've been on boards of different associations that are Black oriented. They've also been on boards that deal with women and violence as well. But it was just the actual seeing it happen made it really real. Like, she understood the difference. She always did. And now it seems as though she is much more affected when there is something even slightly racist towards either her husband or her children, because her youngest daughter just married a Muslim man from a Middle Eastern country. And so, yes, he looks like he gets the whole, you know, are you a terrorist thing? Or and she has become Muslim. The youngest daughter has become Muslim. And so when my sister-in-law starts to hear those things, she is enraged that people would either marginalize not her husband, her daughter, her son-in-law. It's just, she's ready to fight almost at all moments, I think.
I bet. Because I mean, come on. There's no one more passionate than a mother. There isn't. I don't care what anybody says, or a wife. I mean, but a mother. There isn't.
Right.
And, you know, that's why, was it Dalai Lama who said, it's women that are going to change the world. It's women, because we're so passionate and we're having these conversations, right?
Yes.
This is not an easy conversation to have.
No.
But we respect each other. We care about each other. We love each other. We're doing this because it needs to get done, right? But I mean, nothing like a mother. I mean, I think of my children. But then that's where I say, think about every mother out there worried about her son every time he leaves the house and he's driving, if he's a Black boy or a Black man.
It's scary.
And we're not thinking about that when we're over in our bubble and we're working, we're trying to make ends meet, and our own kids are getting ready to go out and they're driving and they're whatever, and we have all these worries. Well, guess what? Think about a Black mother who then, on top of all of that, you know, worried about drugs and alcohol and who are they mixing with and what, and then to think, I have to worry about him or her because of the color of their skin, because there could be, again, we're not saying all police officers are bad, but there could be a racist police officer that pulls them over and treats them differently because of their skin color.
Right. Yeah.
That's what we really, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of terrifying sometimes. I definitely wake up, even now, every once in a while, I'm like thinking about, I'm like, okay, is he safe? I feel anxious. Why am I feeling anxious? Oh, let me check on my son, make sure he's good and still alive and happy, and you know, that nothing has happened. I mean, I would think that I would get a call, and I haven't gotten any calls like that. So I just assume things are good because I have to, so I can keep going through the day. But I definitely am terrified for him.
Yeah. And as parents, we're always, like I always tell my kids, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're always my child. Right. I always see the baby. I always see the child, that, you know, period, end of story. So we're always worried about our kids as parents, but then to be worried because of the color of their skin that they could be harmed or killed because of the color of their skin is just unfathomable. I mean, it shouldn't be, and it's horrible, and it just is. All right, what about work? Have you ever felt treated differently, or your husband or your kids at work, racism at work? And you don't have to be specific, especially if you're, you know, but any racism at work?
Not overtly, but so when I was in West Palm Beach, I worked for, I started out with something called Young Audiences, which was just fun. And we, you know, you did whatever, and it was all for kids. Everyone was very happy. But then I moved on to becoming the education director at the Henry Morrison Flagler Museum. The Henry Morrison Flagler Museum is located in Palm Beach. There are many, many stories about that particular house and Henry Flagler, and possibly, I guess not, he didn't have slaves because it wasn't that time, but his treatment of Black people there, how there were a lot of Black people living in Palm Beach, years and years and years, and then they were burned out and sent across the river to West Palm Beach. And so working in Palm Beach.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that is one of the things that happened there. But I was the education director sometime during the late 80s. I know for a fact, because I was told by the director, that he needed to make sure he got my picture taken and had had a good headshot of me done in Palm Beach so that he could distribute it to the police department so they would not touch me. So
Okay, so my head's going, he's taking your picture because he wants to show that they're so diverse now. No.
nope,
He needs to show the police department so that you are
don't
not
get
harmed.
pulled over. Yeah, so that I am not pulled over when I'm driving wherever in Palm Beach for my job.
Okay, that's beyond sad. That's
Right.
ridiculous.
But, for him, it was like, oh yeah, I'll make sure they don't mess with you or anything, which is like, okay, so I can drive there, but other people can't.
Yeah.
So, and it was that was one of the places that was where race, and it's in the South, of course, but it was so noticeable because there was Palm Beach, which was pretty much predominantly white, and they had their other issues as well. And then right across the river is Black community. There's more diverse communities. They were various, and some of the Black communities were affluent, others were not. But the fact that hardly any of them did anything in Palm Beach, until me, of course, because then I was like, okay, well, then we should have the Black Gala for the African American Arts Organization that I'm affiliated with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did. They had
good.
we had, but it was the first, and they all were, it was kind of strange because people did remember and they brought up those stories because the older Black people were like, oh my gosh, we're sitting here in this place and
Where they all were burned out. Wow.
Yes. And having this really nice catered party. We have a guest speaker. Yeah. It's like, so that was probably the most overt racist kind of thing, job. But I was like, no, I'm going to stay here and do it. And so I whatever I could do to make it more diverse and bring education to people, I'm like, okay, I'm in your face. I'm here.
Dawn has arrived.
And even, I guess I don't know what I represented because I was the first person of color in a professional position there. So everyone else Black that worked there was a maid or a janitor or a groundskeeper. And so,
oh, wow.
Yeah, when I came on board, it was different for them. And they would be like, okay, we got your back. I'm like, okay. And they would tell me if other things happened or if people said things behind my back. I didn't actually care. I wouldn't stop talking to them because of that, but I would just, okay, well then I'm going to stand up here even more and make you uncomfortable. That's, and if you're uncomfortable, I'm sorry, that's your issue. It's not mine. So I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to bring color over here. I'm going to bring diversity. If you have an issue and you don't say it to my face, then you don't have an issue.
Then you don't have an issue. Then you don't have an issue, and it's not even a part of who you are. I can remember another instance, and my husband and I always talk about this. We had a couple, and I'm not going to say the city that we lived in, and they invited us. He had a family membership at a country club. They wanted to go golfing. And so we're like, okay, we'll go golfing. All right. We weren't big golfers, but we're like, okay, we'll go out and golf. So we went out, and this group of white men came up and asked us, oh, I didn't know who they were talking to, but asked us if we had permission to be there. And I was like, I didn't take, my girlfriend, we're laughing, whatever. And I'm like, what are they even talking about, or whatever? So we played, and I'm like, what are they talking about? And Rob goes, I don't know. And our friend just went, oh, don't worry about it. I took care of them. They're fine. So we played like 9 holes, I think. And then they're like, well, let's go inside, and we'll go in, you girls go into the ladies' locker room, and we're going to go into the men's locker room. There's like a steam room or something. And I was like, oh, wow, let's do this. This is fun. I mean, I was in my early 20s, and I'm like, oh, this is, we're going to have a great time. So we go into the ladies' locker room, and I mean, it's a locker room. That's all that was there. It was a locker room. There were some showers, there were some toilets, and there may have been a steam room, but I think it was broken. So we were like, we showered, we were done. We were going to go out to dinner afterwards, whatever. And now we're waiting for the guys. And this is before cell phones. We don't have cell phone. And we're waiting and waiting. And I'm like, where are they? And now we're waiting. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's over an hour. Like, we're done. And I'm like, where are they? And so she turned to me and she goes, oh, they're probably in the club. And I go, well, what? They're in the club. And we're in this long hallway. And at the end, there's this guy standing there. And I go, there's a club here. Why are we standing in the hall? Like, what are we doing? And she goes, oh, we can't go in the club. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, it's only men. And I go, what are you talking about? And she said, it's just men. So I was like, that's ridiculous. So I go, we have to go get them. I'm starving. Let's go. I start walking down the hall, and this young guy goes, where are you going? And I said, I need to go on in there. And I said, they've been in there forever. He goes, you can't go in there. It's men only. So I said, what do you mean it's men only? He goes, well, he goes, you didn't realize that? He goes, I'm surprised you ladies are here anyway. Women aren't supposed to be golfing here today. So I'm like, the naive, I'm like, what are you talking about? So I walk back out, and I'm like, this is insane. So I see that he leaves, and I go in there, and Rob sees me, and I'm flailing my arms, and I walk back out, and I'm like, come on, we have to go to dinner. We have, and as we're leaving the club, this guy says, I still don't understand why you women are here. He goes, women and blacks, what is happening to this club? And I'm walking, and I went, what did he just say?
Yeah.
And I went back, and I went, what did you just say? And he said, you're not supposed to be here. And I go, wait a minute, you said women and blacks. So are you telling me that women are not supposed to be here and blacks aren't supposed to be here? He said, yes. I'm like, and I went over to my friends. I'm like, where have you taken us? Like, what is this place? Did we just walk into the Twilight Zone? And they both looked at me. And the guy went, Rose, I didn't want to say anything. My family's been a member here forever. I knew that you would get upset. It's not that I agree with it, and I went, okay, guys, this is ridiculous. Like, this is ridiculous. And you didn't tell me because you knew the way that I would react. I said, how could you invite me here? I'm not going to even judge you. Because right now I'm thinking, how can you even be a part of this? How could you belong here? How could you, but how could you invite me here to do this? Now, I'm a white woman and I'm getting enraged. I can only imagine being a black person, how I would feel. And let me just mention that the young man that stopped me in the hall was Black, working there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my head was like,
It
and
was
I'm in the
spinning out of
car.
control. Yeah.
I'm in the car. And I could see they're in the front seat because they drove, and I could
Right.
see they're like, and I said, oh, no, we're having a conversation at dinner. Well, and then, you know, Rob just sits back and goes, here we go. And he knows. But,
Right.
and when I told my family back in New York, of course, right away, like I call my mom and I'm like, you're not going to believe this. They
Right.
have a country club down here. No women and no Black. She goes, what? What? She goes, what year is this? This goes on. And,
Yeah.
and it's still going on. Whether it's legal or not, it's still
Exactly.
going on.
Yes.
And we
It
need to
is.
be aware of this. And we need to say, and we need to know, this is wrong. How can people do that? It's wrong.
It's just wrong. Yeah, it is.
And that was my statement to my friends who, we weren't friends that much longer. It was, this is wrong. There's right and then there's wrong. I don't care the way you've grown up. I don't care that this is comfortable because your family has belonged to you forever. This is just wrong. And that's really what it is. It's right or it's just wrong.
Right.
Okay. When you're looking at the news, right? You're looking at the news right now.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your head at? What are you thinking? I mean, how are you feeling? You know, we're seeing everything from we're coming together and there are churches that are coming together and people are kneeling together and people are praying together and there's a lot of these peaceful demonstrations. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we're seeing, you know, riots and violence and what, where's your head at as a Black woman, like watching, if you're even watching, like of what's going on, or is it just a mix of emotions? I would think
It's a mix. It's
Yeah.
definitely a mix of emotions. I mean, because it starts out when I first heard about the murder, it was, oh, okay, this is another one. And I had just been previously thinking, oh, we've been in a pandemic. It's been kind of nice, even though, you know, it's not fun staying inside, but it's nice that there haven't been all these murders going on and that there haven't been issues with the police because everyone's in their homes. I'm like, I hope it doesn't start back up once we start going back out. That was my thought like a couple of days before this happened. And then Monday. And after that, I was like, okay, well, obviously we have not moved and things have not changed. And so my first thought was, you know, I'm very sad, but I don't expect anything to change. I'm just like, this is just another in the line, and it's very, I'm sad about it. But then as more and more people started asking questions and the question of how are you doing became by my white friends, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? I was like, okay, well, this is different because normally that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Ahmaud Arbery, no one really said anything. The fact that it took 2 months to get some kind of notice that it had even occurred,
Mm-hmm.
but it is amazing. But thank goodness there was video, but still, so I started feeling like, okay, I'm somewhat hopeful, but I'm sad. I'm angry that when I see different people taking a knee, I'm like, oh, that's nice. But I'm also very upset that when Colin Kaepernick tried to use his rights and his celebrity to peacefully demonstrate the difference between what we experience as Black Americans and others experience, that people were so focused and ready to take the narrative and change it into something that it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
that it was about all lives matter. Well, if all lives matter, then we shouldn't have to say Black Lives Matter. But clearly, Black lives do not matter
Right.
as much as white lives do in this country. And so that's why we had to say it. But him taking a knee was such a disgrace to the flag, and that all these people had people who fought in wars. Well, we all have people who fought in wars. My ancestors fought in the First World War, the Second World War, in all of the wars, but they came back to a segregated place that would beat them on the street just as soon as anything else.
After they were defending their country.
Right. They went, they defended their country, and then they got beat up because they were Black walking down the street. That's what we're saying. That's what was trying to be elicited. So when I started seeing more people take a knee, it was like, oh, great. But I was also very upset because of the conversations we had had 2 years earlier, when if we had just had this conversation rather than having, oh, but the flag, it's like, but what did people die for? I thought they died for the right for people to protest and take a knee and say that this is wrong. I thought that was the whole point of going to war, to preserve our government, our freedom of speech, our ability to have conversations that are difficult, but apparently not. So it takes someone being murdered, and someone being murdered horrifically in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and us all watching it to get to this place of, oh, okay, there should be a conversation. And maybe they weren't kidding about things. And just because I didn't experience it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So all these things that happen, I mean, these are the stories of my father. These are the stories of my generation. These are the stories of just obviously now. But until everyone saw it and saw it happen so graphically and horribly, the fact that we're here having a conversation is wonderful, and it makes me feel hopeful again. But I'm more of a hopeful type of person.
You are.
But still, but I'm also hurt and angry that it took this, that it took someone obviously being murdered in front of our eyes, and us watching him go from a person who's trying to say, help me, and I can't breathe, to someone who died on camera. That's what it took.
It did.
So yeah, I have this whole mix of emotions of of grieving for his family and grieving with them over his loss, because it sounds like he was a good person. But, and then I'm sad, I'm hopeful, I'm angry, all at the same time.
Which is all understandable. It is. And I, having conversations with white friends and having conversations with Black friends, right? So we talk about this and we're like, why did it take? Okay, well, how many of us have ever seen a person die in front of us? Like, my one girlfriend who was Black was like, I have never seen somebody die. Have you ever seen somebody die? And I'm like, well, I have, but they were dying of cancer. But to see someone murdered, to see someone, no.
Murder.
And in that moment, I think the world stopped and went, what in God's name just happened? Like, what just happened in front? I mean, I couldn't even look. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in my house. I don't think there could be a dry eye in anyone's house. And if there is, you have greater issues.
Yes.
But a man died, and this has been happening and been happening and been happening. But I will tell you, there are a lot of white people that I know that were like, I didn't get it when he took the knee. I didn't get it before. I get it now. I didn't get it. And it makes me think of your daughter-in-law of, I knew that occurs, but until you're right there, oh my God, this is really happening. And I think for so many people, right, wrong, or indifferent, it was like, oh my God, this is happening. Well, no, this is happening right here. This just happened, and it's been happening. Yes. This has been happening to boys and to men. This
Right.
has been happening. And so there's no pretending anymore. It's not even pretending. There's no going back on those bifocals and looking up.
Right.
How can you? So
Right.
we have to discuss this. We have to deal with this. We have to say, oh my God, this is so wrong. And what I love is that people are saying, yeah, this is uncomfortable and I don't know what to say. Okay, then just say something.
Right.
Something is better than nothing. But at least you're asking. So
Yes.
many people, and again, when we have these conversations with my girlfriends, they're like, listen, Rose, you'll talk to a wall, you'll talk to a tree. But one of our other girlfriends, she's very shy. She cares deeply. She loves everybody, but she wouldn't ask a question. She'd be thinking in her head, what if I said the wrong thing and I don't want to hurt them? And I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. But what I love is that the different communities are saying, and it does, it's not across the board, Dawn, you know this, white or black. Some are like, no, don't say anything at all. But most are saying, say anything. Just say something so that we know that you know what is going on and that we can have a conversation about this.
Right.
And I love the vulnerability. And what did I say when I sent out my emails? When I called people, I said, listen, give me grace because I can't possibly know what you're going through. I can empathize. I care deeply. I love deeply. I can't possibly know. So if I say something, if I do something, please give me grace. And as my friends say, whatever, Rose, don't say this, or Rose, that, whatever, you know where I'm coming from. But to watch a man die on video, on TV, there's no way that anybody can turn away from this anymore. There just isn't. And it's sad as sad can be that it took that there have been so many people. That's what's so sad. And here's the thing though, that we don't want to happen because you said this. And so many of my friends, okay, it's news right now. It's news right now. Is it going to go away? And that's where hopefully there are going to be more white people that are going to say, no, tell me what to do. That's what I did with my friends. Tell me what to do. What can I do? Well, Rose, use your voice, use your platform, use your followers, use something, do something. And we're all different. Not everybody's going to come on and say, okay, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to and then I'm going to transfer and I'm going to make a book. No, but you could be donating. You could be, not everybody wants to protest. Not everybody, you could be whatever, do something in your church, do something for an organization, have a conversation in your home, get books for your children, talk to your children about it, because it doesn't matter. I mean, we know this, black or white, however we raise our children, the minute they go out into middle school and high school, we don't know who they're with and what they're bringing to the table and what they're going to be learning from them. We just don't, and we have to prepare them for that. So I love that my friends on social media are sharing books and they're sharing podcasts and they're sharing different areas that people can educate themselves, because that's the other part of this.
Yeah.
In our history books are skewed. I talked to a gentleman.
Yeah.
You may know Rodney. I don't know if you know Rodney from North Dallas Networking Group. But Rodney is a historian. He studied history. I can't think of Rodney's last name. He was in NDNG, and I'll find his name. He's a great guy. He does leather restoration. But Rodney and I had a conversation 2 days ago, and he went to school for history, but he follows history, and the history that he's been sharing with me of what has gone on in our country, and then how politics get involved and government gets involved, and who's really out there doing a lot of these riots, and really knowing, Rose, like what goes on. Like, we have to educate ourselves. And so he was telling me a whole bunch of things from both sides, both perspectives. And I'm like, I I don't know. I didn't know half this stuff. I didn't know this. He goes, Rose, half of my family who's Black doesn't know this. Like, we have to educate ourselves. You know, people start rewriting history. Right?
Yes.
Because
Yes,
some history is uncomfortable. So what happens? You're in school and you're learning about one thing. That's not exactly the way it happened. And now look at our media.
right.
Do we have any media that is really telling the truth? You know,
Right.
we all just assume what we see is for real. Well, with technology now, anything can be doctored.
Right.
Anything can be. So it's just like when you meet a person. You know, him and I were talking about this. Don't judge a book by its cover. Get to read that book, get to know that book,
Right.
and then make the decision. And I think that's what we all need to learn here is like, don't just prejudge because what you heard your parents say, or what was done to you, or what was done to your parents, or what you think, or what you know. Have a conversation, get to know that person, and be open about it, but give each other grace, because there are going to be uncomfortable conversations. And we're not always going to ask the questions in the most sensitive manner because we may not know. But I think if we're open to the conversation, because, you know, a lot of my white friends were like, well, I'm afraid. And I've said things on social media and then people got really mad at me and I'm like, okay, so they got mad at you. Go to the next person. Go to someone that you know and you respect and ask someone who knows you. That person doesn't know you and you don't know that person. So move on. Right? That happens whether you're white or Black. So just move on, but don't let it then cower you to, I'm not going to say anything because when I say something, everybody gets mad at me. No, not everybody gets. Let's not make a blanket statement.
Right,
you know?
right.
I mean, let's not be ridiculous. All right. So is there anything, because this is your voice, I want you to be heard. You're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a wife, right? Just like they are.
Right.
Except, and a big except, that you are treated differently and your family is treated differently because of the color of your skin. And so then there are fears because of that goes on.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it's almost hard to describe, but it's also the thing that these things happen every day and we're accustomed to them, really. And so we just move through life as though this is the way it is. This is the way it's been. We're just going to move through life and meet the people who have hearts that we want to share our lives with. We move to places that make us feel comfortable. So most of those places for us have been diverse places. But the fear is always in the back, but you can't let it stop you from doing what you need to do to move things forward. But what I really want, and I'm hoping that people will understand and will hope that change will be affected in terms of policing and how the police are trained and how they see their role in the community. The fact that the man that murdered George Floyd had 18 complaints and only two reprimands, reprimands out of 18. So he was leading up to this moment. And it was probably fairly obvious to people in the department that he worked in, but it wasn't addressed. And there are others that that these are the people that regularly do things outside the scope of what they should be doing. So the fact that they have been up until, and it seems like up until just the past few days, where the police are like, oh, we should be part of the community, not just above it and tossing the community and, acting as though these people, that they're at war with people in their own community, i.e. at war with Black people just for being Black. So it would be helpful if, rather than just those 18 things being looked at, that actions were taken.
Sure,
Definite
of
actions.
course.
I mean, that guy most likely should have been fired a while ago.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there are plenty of other cops that either should be disciplined or retrained. And if they can't be retrained, then they do need to be let go. But there's actions. There's actions. This did not have to happen. This does not have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know that there are people out there that are currently serving as policemen in all areas of the country that should not be. You know that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Those people need to go.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Not in a few days, but like right now, they need to go. And the fact that the police union in where George Floyd was killed, the fact that they were trying to get the jobs back for those 4 officers, that needs to stop. I don't care if you're the police organization and you should be protecting the good police officers.
Yes.
And you're not. By protecting bad ones, you're harming those that are doing the best of their ability. You're making it so much harder for them to go out, and you're putting targets on their back, and there shouldn't be. The fact that police have been murdered over or run over, that's ridiculous. Don't put targets on their back. Figure out how to join and how to listen to communities, how to better retrain, how to use the tools that you already have in place to make the force better, to use the tools to weed out those that should not be working in those jobs.
Yeah, we have a friend of ours who's, we know him from a Christian organization that we're involved with, and he's retired, but he was police. And he said, the police are not above the law. They are not above the law. Right. And there are very, very good men and women in the police department. And then there are very bad men and women, and they need to go. They need to go. And there needs to be, I don't know what the answer is, but somebody needs to be, who is in charge of going through? I don't understand. How do you have all of those write-ups in any job that you're in, but let alone law enforcement? How do you still have a job? I don't understand that. And like you said, this was leading up to this. How could this be allowed? And so the powers that be need to be going through, and why are they not going through every single person's record? I mean, listen, you're in corporate America. I don't care. Even if you're working for wherever you're working, you're getting a review. You have a file. Listen, how does this happen? So I agree with you. Everything needs to be reviewed and action needs to be taken now. I mean, and that's the key. I don't believe it. I'm also hopeful, but the conversation can't stop. There's no way of stopping. We watched a man die in front of us. So the conversations need to continue. There will still be hurt. There will still be uncomfortableness.
Yes.
But hopefully it's going to open up eyes. It's going to open up hearts. It's going to open up minds, and it's going to open up more and more conversation so that people can just like one another, love one another, regardless of skin color. And I would love for I wanted for my children, but I would love for my children, my grandchildren, to grow up. And I don't think it's naive, but grow up in a place where it doesn't matter. And I don't want my friends, I don't want you, your husband, you worried about, I mean, it breaks my heart thinking that you worry about your son. I don't want any of my friends to have to worry because of the color of their skin. I don't get it. I will never get it. But that's not who I am. That's not who you are. But there are people out there. And hopefully They will learn something by watching you, by watching other people. So I thank you, my friend. I know this is not an easy conversation.
No.
I know it's not, but I love you. You know that I
Yes.
care about you.
And I love you too.
And I appreciate you doing this. And let's just hope that the goal that we're hoping for is going to happen. And more importantly, when we get off of here, we need to find out when we're meeting up and having crantini cookies. But I do love you, and I do thank you for doing this. And I just hope and pray that this just stops, that it's awful. And I hope and I pray that this is the change that we've been hoping for and praying for. And
Yes.
yeah. All right. Love you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Hope Through Conversations. I hope that you have found value in today's episode. With 60% white and only 13% Black people in this country, our Black friends need our help in the fight against racism. It's not good enough to be a good Christian or to love everyone or to have Black friends. We need to be proactive and continue this conversation at home, with our friends, in our businesses, and in our communities in order to elicit change. If there is a specific topic or question you would like me to cover on the show, I would love to hear from you. Please reach out at hopethroughconversations.com. Tune in to our next episode of Hope Through Conversations by visiting our website at hopethroughconversations.com or rosecolorasi.com.